Hey everybody and welcome back to the channel. Well, we have finally made it to the fifth and final installment of my Oscar Best Picture tier list series. Today, I'm going to be discussing every winner from 2010 to the present winner, Oppenheimer. But even after I'm done talking about Oppenheimer, make sure to stick around because I'm going to be giving out my personal picks from all 96 years of the Academy Awards. My favorite acting performances, my favorite director, my favorite screenplay, and best picture. So it's going to be a jam-packed episode, so make sure to stick around. And also, I usually say this at the end of the video, but I'm going to say it at the beginning here. Please feel free to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. This series has been a year in the making, watching all 96 Best Picture winners, filming these tier list videos, editing and getting them out to you. So it would mean a lot to me if you could drop a like and subscribe to the channel. But without further ado, let's jump into the 2010 winner. Kicking us off is Tom Hooper's The King's Speech. The movie follows the true story of King George VI, who had a really bad stutter and was scared to address the entire country, so he hired an unorthodox speech therapist to assist him. Now, when people think of this year, they think about all the movies that could have won. There was Inception, Black Swan, Toy Story 3, and The Social Network, which would have been my personal choice. And honestly, I probably would have preferred any of those films to win over The King's Speech, but I do not think The King's Speech is a poor movie. I do, however, think the story is a little bit straightforward. Just by me explaining the premise, you can probably already tell how the story is going to play out. There is a person who comes into power, they're having some struggles, they find someone that they want to work with to get over the struggles, and at the end of the movie is the big event that they were working up towards. But I think it's still a really, really fun watch. Colin Firth and Jeffrey Rush as the two main leads have really great back and forth chemistry, and I really enjoyed them in every single scene they were in together. I also think the direction is pretty fun. Tom Hooper used some unique framing throughout that really kind of got into the mind of King George and kind of dealt with his insecurities and his ever-shifting mind regarding his stutter that he was working through. And I really think these odd framing choices really pair well with the story elements and what the story is about. Ultimately, I do think The King's Speech is a really fun, watchable movie. I definitely don't think it probably deserved Best Picture, but it's by no means the worst one I've had to watch during this challenge. I am going to put The King's Speech up here in the good category. Up next is probably one of the more interesting Best Picture winners of all time, The Artist. The movie follows an aging black and white silent film star whose career is slowly coming to an end as talkies are on the rise. When an old acquaintance is blowing up in the new talkie movie space, he does see a window where he could possibly revive his career. Now, when I say this movie is one of the most interesting Best Picture winners of all time, it's because in the 96 years of the Oscars, there are only two films to ever win that are silent. The first being the first ever winner, Wings, all the way back in the 1920s, and then this 2011 winner, The Artist. I absolutely love the callback to all the old silent filmmaking styles, and I mean, there is a little bit of sound in this movie. It's very, very, sporadic throughout the runtime, but when it's used, it's very effective and really punches you right in the face, and I absolutely loved how it is utilized. In all honesty, this feels like a movie that just shouldn't exist. If you told me a black and white silent film was coming out in the 21st century, I would probably tell you that would just fade into obscurity and it would make almost no money and no one would really care about it except some, really artsy film critics. But the fact that a movie like this rose to the level it did and took home Best Picture at the Oscars is kind of mind-boggling to me, but I really appreciate it because I think this movie is a really, really fun and unique time that we just don't see come around all that often. I know obviously this movie probably won't be for everyone as it's a little bit out there. A lot of people just don't like silent movies in general, but if you're looking for a very, very unique watch, I highly suggest The Artist. I am going to grab it and I am going to put The Artist all the way towards the top of the good category. Up next is Ben Affleck's Argo. The movie follows the true story of how the USA and Canada worked together to get 6 Americans out of Iran during the war. To get them out, they had them pose as a film crew so they could get them on a plane and fly them out of the country. Now, when looking at Best Pictures as a whole, I don't think this is like the best acted or the flashiest or just kind of the biggest production, But I do think this is one of the more insane true stories that you'll see throughout all the 96 winners. The fact that they snuck into, or flew into Iran and snuck out these 6 Americans by having them pose as a film crew is just mind-boggling to me. I did do some research after finishing the film, and they did take some liberties to making the film feel a little bit more tense than what actually happened in real life, but that still doesn't, like, cover up the fact that they really pulled this off in real life. The film itself is a white knuckle experience from like the middle part of the movie onwards. The entire first half is a fantastic setup to a rescue mission. There's a lot of back and forth, heads butting, things like that. But once they actually land in Iran and start the mission, it is a true white knuckle experience. I was nervous the entire time, and I absolutely love when a thriller can do that to me. I really don't have too much else to say about this movie. It's just really a wild, true story and a fantastic thriller from beginning to end. It's one that I highly recommend if you haven't seen it before. I am going to take Argo, and I am going to throw it up here in the great category. Up next is another amazing film based on a true story, 12 Years a Slave. The movie follows Solomon Northup, a free black man living in New York in the pre-Civil War United States. He gets abducted and sold into slavery, and we follow his journey through the southern states. This is just a gut-wrenching, soul-sucking movie. It is just devastating, and it shows the horrors of slavery on full display. And I think it is the best movie that displays, slavery as a whole and how horrific it was. The director, Steve McQueen, has this movie looking just fantastic. The opening shot shows a bunch of slaves lined up in front of a cotton field, and just seeing how drained they all are as a man is yelling at them just really sets the tone, and it's just a perfect opening shot to let the audience know how heavy this experience is about to be. Chiwetel Ejiofor in the lead role is also fantastic as Solomon Northup. You can just feel every single emotion he goes through on this entire roller coaster of a journey. But the true standout performance for me in this film is Lupita Nyong'o. She is kind of her slave master's favorite, slave. She picks the most cotton and he abuses her in multiple different ways. And there is a scene where she takes a whipping, and it is one of the most brutal scenes I have ever seen in a film. It is just such a emotional experience, and it is very, very hard to watch. When thinking about this film compared to other Best Picture winners, it's kind of similar to Schindler's List. It's a subject matter that is kind of hard to discuss. Not many people want to touch on it, but it's a story that needs to be told, and it is handled with such care and done in such an amazing way. It is just truly one of those films that everyone needs to experience at least once in their life, even if it is very, very emotionally heavy and you're not sure you can handle it. I absolutely love 12 Years a Slave. It is one of my favorite Best Picture winners, and I am going to put it up here in the amazing category. Next is Alejandro González Iñárritu's Birdman. The movie follows an aging actor who once portrayed a superhero in the movies. To mount a comeback, he writes and stars in his own Broadway play, but nothing seems to go right as opening night is approaching. The really fun thing about this movie is it's filmed and edited in a way where it looks like everything is done in one shot. This means the dialogue never seems to slow down, as someone's always entering the scene and picking up on a conversation, or a door is swinging shut and the camera is shifting to 2 new people entering a room. And it's a very, very fast-paced movie with a lot of dialogue, and it really keeps you engaged throughout the entire runtime. The casting of Michael Keaton in the lead role is also a ton of fun because he played Batman, and by the time Birdman came out, he was already getting a little bit older himself. So there's kind of a little bit of meta commentary in there, as it's possible that he was feeling the same way, but just the casting was on point with that choice there. He does a fantastic job in the movie too, but the 2 standout performances for me are Ed Norton as kind of this stuck-up actor that's really famous and gets to play in the Broadway adaptation as well, and Emma Stone, who plays Michael Keaton's daughter, who is just kind of strung out, was a drug addict, and trying to reconnect with her father a little bit. Both of them are just phenomenal here, and you know I had to give a shout out to Emma Stone, as she is my all-time favorite actress. A lot of people kind of criticize this movie as it's a movie about a struggling actor and kind of how to get a production off the ground, and it was awarded by, you know, Hollywood, the Academy. And yeah, it is kind of one of those movies that feels a little bit not congratulatory, because I mean it is about struggling in the industry, but I guess it could be like, oh, your struggles are so much more important than everyone else's, you know, the common man's. I don't really feel that way though, but I know a lot of people do. But I ultimately think Birdman is just a really, really fun movie, and it has an interesting filming style that we have not seen in any other Best Picture winner. It's one that I definitely know won't be for everyone, just given its content and its style and kind of how wordy it is at some points. But I think Birdman is a fantastic movie that kind of deals with, you know, trying to find oneself, trying to pick yourself up off the ground, try to reconnect with family. Even if you aren't an actor or super big into Hollywood productions or movies, there is something here that you can connect with and enjoy, because at the end of the day, this movie is about a man who is just struggling, trying to find his place in the world, and it has an ending that really leaves a lot up to interpretation. I have my own read of the film, but I'm not going to spoil that here, but I definitely suggest checking this movie out and coming up with your own conclusions. But for now, I am going to grab Birdman, and I am going to place it at the back half of the great category. Now I'm going to talk about one of my biggest surprises throughout this entire Best Picture watch through, Spotlight. The movie follows the true story about how the Boston Globe uncovered a massive molestation scandal within their local diocese, and upon further investigation, it shook the Catholic Church to its core, uncovering molestation across the country and the world. Now, I'm a huge fan of investigative journalism movies where there are just a bunch of reporters digging, sifting through other, like, past reports, going to interviews and trying to find other people to communicate with just to dig up any sort of information for this small lead that they got. And this movie is kind of like the peak of that for me. I was engaged throughout this entire film. I absolutely love this screenplay. This is hands down one of the best screenplays to ever grace the Oscar Best Picture category. This movie also just has an absolutely stacked cast from top to bottom. We have Michael Keaton returning for another Best Picture winner. We have Rachel McAdams, Mark Ruffalo, Liev Schreiber, just all fantastic actors, and they are killing it here in this movie. I also know when this story dropped, this was one of the biggest stories, you know, of the past 20 to 30 years, just uncovering all of the horrific things that were going on with the church. And it's like a story that really deserved this movie, because they put a lot of effort in digging and clawing to get all the information, because there was a lot of people trying to cover up everything that was going on, and just kind of to see how that all, you know, accumulated to them finally getting the massive, massive break that allowed them to write their ginormous piece in the Boston Globe is just a fantastic film experience. I know a lot of people really, really like this movie, but this film just kind of hit me to the core. I was hanging on to every last word of this screenplay. It's honestly a white-knuckle experience, just like I was talking about with Argo, but this isn't a thriller. This is just people going out on their own, trying to find people to talk to. It's just a movie about good journalism, and for me just to be on the edge of my seat, freaking out and just excited to see what the next scene was going to bring, that just shows how fantastic the writing is here. And for that alone, I am going to grab Spotlight, and it's going to go up here next to All About Eve in the amazing category. Up next is one of the craziest winners of all time, Barry Jenkins' Moonlight. The movie is a coming-of-age story where we follow a boy through 3 distinct parts of his life: his young childhood, his teenage years, and his young adult life. Now, when I say this is one of the craziest winners at the Oscars, I'm pretty sure if you're watching this video, you know of the incident. La La Land was announced as the winner, but they had the wrong card. They actually still had the Best Actress card, and Moonlight was actually the winner. And I know that sparked a lot of controversy. I will say up front, I'm probably a bigger fan of La La Land personally, but I still think Moonlight is a very worthy Best Picture winner. Another thing that I'm going to personally inject into here is that I am a huge coming of age movie fan, and I'm surprised it took this many years to get a proper coming of age film to win Best Picture. And while it is a coming of age movie, it is really, really raw and brutal and in your face. Most of the time when I think of the coming of age movie genre, I think of a little bit more heartwarming, The Breakfast Club, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, Little Miss Sunshine, those type of films, where Moonlight is a very, very heavy watch. We kind of follow our main character, Chiron, through a lot of depressing elements of his life. His mom is a drug addict. He is constantly bullied at school. He's made fun of because of his sexual orientation, because he's gay. And it's just a movie that is very touching and moving, but it's also kind of brutal at certain points as well. But I do think that makes it more realistic as a whole as well. This also marks the first movie that A24 won Best Picture for. A24 has been a movie studio that's on the rise, and they make a lot of my favorite films. So it was really, really fun to see one of their films finally reach the heights and take home a Best Picture prize. I think Moonlight is a film that's going to stand the test of time. It's going to get better with age, and it is a worthy Best Picture winner. And I am going to take Moonlight and put it at the back half of the great category. Up next is Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water. The film follows a mute janitor worker who works at a secret government facility, where they are holding this amphibious man creature. She starts to interact with the creature, and they end up forming a deep bond. Now, if you've been watching the series since the beginning, I probably haven't had the hottest takes. I know some of my movies are probably ranked a little bit higher than others, like Kramer vs. Kramer's pretty high up on my list, but I don't think I've said anything really, really out there yet. And this is a film that I have a pretty strong stance on because I absolutely love The Shape of Water, and I was honestly surprised that some people really don't care for this Best Picture win. For me personally, this is in the upper echelon of Del Toro movies, kind of up there with The Devil's Backbone and Pan's Labyrinth for me. I think this really captures that story-like mystical wonder that Pan's Labyrinth has, but it has a little bit warmer vibe to it. Pan's Labyrinth can be a bit cold and dark because it has that war setting, and I think The Shape of Water is more touching and kind of heartwarming by the end of it all, even though it kind of has that fairy tale, kind of like lukewarm, sad ending as well. I think Sally Hawkins and Octavia Spencer are fantastic in this movie. I love the both of them, and Doug Jones as the creature just portrays this kind of weird, mysterious, otherworldly figure just fantastic as well. If I do have to knock this movie a little bit, I do think the villain is a little one-note, kind of paint by the numbers, but that villain is not why I'm here to watch this movie. I'm here for that mystical, dreamlike wonder feeling that we all know Del Toro is so great at crafting. And this type of movie hasn't won Best Picture ever. I mean, The Lord of the Rings is the really only other fantasy-like film that won Best Picture, but they're completely on different planes in my opinion. There's just not that sense of kind of like floaty dreamlike wonder like I just said with Lord of the Rings, where The Shape of Water kind of just has that fairy tale like aspect that I absolutely adore. So while some people really don't like this movie, I am a huge fan of The Shape of Water, and it's going to the upper half of the great category. Up next is Peter Farrelly's Green Book. The movie follows a white bouncer who is hired to drive a black musician through the Deep South in the 1960s on his tour when that was something that was really frowned upon. Now, I don't understand why this movie won Best Picture when Driving Miss Daisy literally won in the 80s. This is pretty much the exact same movie, but the roles are reversed. Where Driving Miss Daisy had the old white lady who could no longer drive, and Morgan Freeman was hired to drive her around, and they kind of learned more about one another, aka the white woman learned how not to be racist. This is that, except the white man is driving the black man around. I just don't see why this movie had to win when we have that same film winning decades ago. And also, what really irritates me about Green Book is The Favorite was there this year. The Favorite absolutely deserved Best Picture, and it had a shot with, Olivia Colman winning Best Actress. I also think Roma probably would have been a better winner as well, or pretty much any other film nominated that year. I mean, Green Book is just very paint by the numbers. I gave you that plot synopsis, and you can already see the entire film in your head. It is just a white man and a black man interacting in the Deep South in the 1960s, and they get into a lot of sketchy racial conflict situations, and they kind of dig their way out as they bond the further they go into the tour dates. And I don't even really think that's a spoiler. Like, that's just what the movie is about, and that's what the entire film is. I don't really think the movie is poorly made either. The directing is competent. I think Mortensen and Ali have really good chemistry throughout their scenes. But it's just like, why did this win? We've seen this before. It's nothing, refreshing or even kind of a good twist on what this film is going for. It's just very straightforward. I don't know. It's just one of those head scratchers that the Academy seems to do every once in a while. I am going to throw Green Book down here in the average category. Like I said, I don't hate this movie. It's just, meh, why did it have to win? Now that we got a mid-Best Picture winner out of the way, we get to talk about an absolute banger, Bong Joon-ho's Parasite. The movie follows a poor Korean family who infiltrates the life of a rich couple and slowly takes over their household. But what both families don't know is something is happening below their feet. Now, to get the biggest thing out of the way, this is the first foreign language film to take home Best Picture, which is just a massive achievement, but another thriller won Best Picture. That is just something that does not happen all too often. I kind of put this up here with the horror thriller Silence of the Lambs wins. And the one thing about the Academy is they don't go out to bat for this genre of movie all too often, but when they do, they know how to select an absolute winner. This film just has fantastic tension from beginning to end. You just kind of hang off of every single scene, and it's just kind of, it's building up to something, but you don't know what it's building up to. And when it gets to the twist that I won't really speak about, but it involves like a past housekeeper that comes back into the home to do something, it just goes off the rails and it's absolutely crazy. I remember being kind of scared watching this for the first time when that sequence takes place, and it really holds up on a rewatch as well. This movie is just so tense, and that ending, even beyond that twist part, is just fantastic. It is an all-timer ending, and it is just a complete package. It is obviously one of the best thrillers of all time and one of the Best Picture winners of all time. Bong Joon-ho also just knows how to direct a film. The tension in this movie is fantastic. The pacing is amazing, but also just how he has each shot focused and swaps back and forth between the poor family and the rich family, kind of when there's moments when they're both in the house, are just amazing. He knows when to cut away to other characters that aren't exactly interacting in the same, plane or scene as other characters. It's just one of the most well put together Best Picture winners, in my opinion. This is just the complete package, and if for some reason you have not seen Parasite, do yourself a favor, check it out as soon as possible, because Parasite is the next entry in my masterpiece category. Up next is Chloe Zhao's Nomadland. The movie follows a woman in her 60s who sets out to be a nomad after losing her husband and her home. Now, this is a film where I read a lot more reviews of it after finishing the film than I normally do. I was on Letterboxd reading user reviews, I was on Metacritic, I was on Rotten Tomatoes. I was just trying to feel out people's overall vibe to this movie, because I personally am not a fan of this movie, and I completely understand why people do. It really has this very raw, real human approach to it, because a lot of the people acting alongside the main character portrayed by Frances McDormand are actual nomads in real life. So it has kind of this pseudo-documentary feel to it, and you get to experience the real human emotions that many people do who are living out of their vans in the middle of the desert, just traveling around from working odd job to odd job. And I did feel that raw human emotion in a few scenes throughout the movie. My big issue here is that I just felt like I was watching an extremely rich Hollywood actor portray as a poor person with a lot of issues alongside people that are kind of going through a lot and just struggling through life. I also felt like there wasn't a lot of time spent on the issues that got people to this point. It seems like a lot of people in the film kind of accepted their nomads. They kind of like all these people that they're interacting with living out of their cars. But I mean, I don't think that's the ideal lifestyle. I don't feel like that's the dream that many of them want. I mean, some people may be okay with that lifestyle and they seem to be making the most out of it. But I mean, the healthcare issues, the job market, just not being able to find a solid base to start building off of are many issues people face in America today. And because of that, it may force people in this lifestyle and they just get stuck in a rut. And I feel like the film doesn't want to address that. It just kind of wants to highlight this lifestyle, which is fine. Like if you want to do that, you can, but I feel like that would work a lot better as a documentary, in my opinion, especially kind of having this weird element of having a massive movie star be your lead character. I don't know. It just didn't sit right with me. But with that being said, this is a stunning film. There are some amazing shots, specifically of the Dakotas that I loved, kind of these wide open plains that the nomads inhabit and just kind of live their lives off of. And I think it's that beautiful filmmaking, along with some of the raw human emotional moments, that really make people love this movie. But I just couldn't get over the fact that the film feels kind of gross to me. And that may not be what Chloe Zhao was going for, and I do not think it's what she was going for. I think she was trying to make this heartwarming film, but to me, it just didn't work for me. I felt a little bit icky while watching it, and for that, this isn't a movie I want to personally revisit, and I am going to throw it down here in the below average category. Now, if you thought my The Shape of Water take was hot, you've made it to probably my hottest take of this entire series, and that is with Sean Hayter's CODA. The movie follows a young girl who has two deaf parents and a deaf brother. When she wants to go to college and chase her dreams of being a singer, she feels a little bit held back and conflicted because she wants to assist with her family's fishing business. Now, when I was talking about Moonlight, I mentioned that I am a huge coming-of-age movie fan. My two favorite movie genres are horror and coming of age, and they are two genres that never show up at the Oscars, especially in the Best Picture category. The Silence of the Lambs is probably the only film that is even slightly horror related, and Moonlight and CODA are probably the only two coming of age films to win Best Picture. Now, coming of age is represented at the Oscars in other categories normally. Little Miss Sunshine definitely was close to winning Best Picture a couple decades ago. Juno won Best Screenplay. Almost Famous also won Best Screenplay in 2000. And you know, I'm glad that those films show up there, but there's so many other coming-of-age movies that I just absolutely adore. The Breakfast Club, 16 Candles, The Way, Way Back, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, The Edge of 17. There are just so many that speak to me. And I think that's because coming-of-age movies are films I discovered when I was in high school, going through a little bit of a rough patch of my life, trying to figure out who I was, and they just spoke to me. And CODA is one of those movies that speaks to me as well. While I may not have any deaf members in my family, CODA is still kind of that story where it's a young person just trying to find their place in the world, wanting to chase their dreams, and those types of stories always just affect me deeply and move me emotionally, and CODA is a movie that makes me cry every single time. I mean, that ending is just like a punch in the gut. I had tears streaming down my face, and I will say, throughout this entire Best Picture watch through, there are not many movies that made me cry. I think the only ones that really had me in tears by the end were probably The Best Years of Our Lives and a film I haven't talked about yet, Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I just absolutely adore when a film is able to move me so much that I am actually in tears. I also love that Troy Kotsur win. I probably love that even more than the CODA Best Picture win. Troy Kotsur is just fantastic in this film, and I just love every single second he is on screen. He is so funny and endearing and heartwarming. And that scene where he puts his hand on his daughter's neck to listen to her sing is just another scene that just makes me cry in this movie, and it's not even the one that makes me cry at the end. This is a film I'll defend till the end of time. It may not be the flashiest Best Picture winner. It may not have the best directing. The story may be a little bit paint by the numbers. I also know it was a remake of another foreign language film. But I don't care. I love these Sundance coming-of-age movies. They just move me every single time. And for that alone, I am going to take CODA and put it at the top half of the great category. Up next is the winner of the first Oscars that I covered on my channel, Everything Everywhere All at Once. The movie follows an aging Chinese immigrant who owns a laundromat who is swept up into an amazing journey where she can time hop to different alternate timelines of her life and save the universe. I remember going to the theaters back in March of 2022 and watching this movie and just being absolutely mind blown. The Daniels did so much on such a limited budget that I just couldn't believe they pulled it off. And like I said in my CODA review, this is another movie that moved me to tears. It is just such a zany, wild, overwhelming experience that spoke to me. Just kind of that story of not being able to connect with your parents and feeling lost in this age of never-ending information and constant, just word flow being thrown at you, just spoke to me on a human level. Michelle Yeoh, Kioi Kwan, Stephanie Hsu, Jamie Lee Curtis, I love all of their performances. Do I think Jamie Lee Curtis deserved her Oscar? Probably not. Not even probably the top 5 best performances for supporting that year. But I'm happy she won an Oscar. I like her. She's a good actress. But they are all phenomenal in this movie nonetheless. I absolutely love the Michelle Yeoh and Ke-Huy Quan wins. I just love both of them, and all of their speeches throughout that entire award season were fantastic. It was also just amazing watching the journey that this film took from premiering all the way back at South by Southwest and just keeping its steam all the way out through the awards season. I didn't think this was a film that could even touch the Oscars. Maybe get a couple nominations, but not absolutely sweep them when I saw it for the first time in 2022. So this is kind of that first full Oscars journey I rode with a movie that took an amazing ride all the way to the finish line. And it's a film that I love. I love every single rewatch as well. I'm always picking up on something new just because there's so much happening on screen. It's probably an all-timer Oscar win in my opinion too, just because it's another sci-fi movie that has nothing to compete with when looking at the other Oscar Best Picture winners. Nothing like this film has even come close to winning the award. I just absolutely love what the Daniels did here. I know some people don't care for this movie, and some people absolutely adore it. It is kind of like that ultimate love it or hate it type of film, but for me, it is ranking very high up, and it is my 4th favorite Best Picture winner of all time. Well, we have made it. The final and most recent Best Picture winner, Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. The film follows the true story of J. Robert Oppenheimer's involvement in creating the atomic bomb during World War II. Now, this is the second movie where I covered the full Oscars race on my channel, so you can go back and get my full thoughts on all of the Best Picture winners if you want. This probably isn't even close to my favorite Best Picture nominee from last year. If it was up to me, I really think Anatomy of a Fall or Poor Things deserved the award, but I'm never going to argue about someone who fully supports Oppenheimer. This truly is the movie of last year. Alongside Barbie, the whole Barbenheimer thing was truly, the 2 movies of 2023 and fully encompassed that year. And Christopher Nolan, man, he was overdue. He deserved an award, even though I probably prefer some of his other films to Oppenheimer. It's an amazing feat. He is such a master with that IMAX camera and just creating amazing visuals. My favorite part of the film personally is Cillian Murphy. I rewatched the movie for this Best Picture challenge, and I really enjoyed his performance on the second watch through. Just kind of seeing the emotional shift his face subtly takes throughout the film is truly astonishing, and that gymnasium scene is one of the best sequences of last year, alongside the Trinity test as well. Emily Blunt is also fantastic in this movie. Obviously, her monologue in the latter half of the film is the true standout portion. I will say the one thing I don't really agree with, I don't think Robert Downey Jr. really deserved to win for his performance. I think it was more of a legacy award in my eyes. I think pretty much every other nominee in the category gave a better performance, if you're asking me personally. And I do think he is kind of the one spot I'm kind of iffy on. Mostly his storyline. I think everything after the gymnasium scene, the Trinity test, and Oppenheimer meeting the president kind of fell apart for me. Those hearings at the end drag on for way too long, in my opinion, and that's where everything just got a little bit shaky for me personally. But I'm not really going to talk too much crap about this movie. I absolutely understand why so many people adore this and are ranking it very high in their tier list of all-timers when it comes to Best Picture winners. It's just kind of one of those films that doesn't fully work for me. I completely understand why people adore it from a craft perspective, and it is a true spectacle. It's a movie I'm definitely going to rewatch multiple times in the future, but for me personally, definitely not my favorite Nolan, definitely not my favorite Best Picture winner. Still really good though, and I am going to throw it down here at the back half of the great category. Well, there it is. All 96 Best Picture winners placed on my tier list. This was honestly such an amazing journey, and even though I didn't love all of these films, it's very unique to watch them all in order and just kind of see how cinema progressed throughout the years and kind of what stories were important to the Academy in certain decades. I'm just going to do a quick scroll through of all of them so you can see all of them in order in case you were curious, as I know all of them haven't been on screen throughout these last couple episodes. But also, if you want to follow me on Letterboxd, I'll put that on screen here. And in my list section, I also have all 96 films ranked in a list. So as I scroll down here, make sure to stick around after I reach the bottom of this. I am going to transition over and give my personal picks for my favorite performances in all 4 major acting categories, along with screenplay, director, and best picture, along with a few other stats that I took note of while going through and watching every single film. But here we go. Here's the bottom of the list. We have my favorite Best Picture winner, Casablanca, at the top, and it is bookended by the worst Best Picture winner, Crash, at the bottom. This has been such an amazing journey. If you are thinking about doing this, I highly recommend it. It's definitely an interesting journey. Not all the films are good, so don't expect that. But this was an absolute blast. But now let's toss it over to me in the editing bay, where I will cover all of my favorite picks from all 96 years. Before I talk about my favorites from all 96 years, I first wanted to hand out my personal Oscars from 2010 to the present day. In supporting actress, I went with Lupita Nyong'o in 12 Years a Slave. She is just phenomenal in that movie. She is the true standout performance, in my opinion, and it's probably just the performance that has impacted me the most over this 14-year span. Supporting actor and lead actress, I went with Ke Huy Quan and Michelle Yeoh in Everything Everywhere All at Once. It was obviously my favorite movie from this time period, so it was very easy to select both of them, and I absolutely loved listening to both of them give their speeches all throughout that award season. It was just fantastic. And also, just touch on Best Picture here, I'm also going with Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's just a movie that I absolutely adore, and it's my most logged movie on Letterboxd since I downloaded the app. It's just a movie that I want to revisit multiple times in the future and continue just to pick up on more things throughout. For lead actor, I did go with Cillian Murphy in Oppenheimer. I kind of went back and forth on this one. I almost went with Michael Keaton in Birdman, but for me, Cillian Murphy really did just take that Christopher Nolan script and run with it and did a fantastic job. Speaking of scripts, my favorite screenplay is Spotlight. That is probably one of my favorite screenplays I have seen in recent memory. I think it's easily top 5 at the Oscars for Oscars all time in the screenplay category. Just phenomenal. And director, I went between Christopher Nolan, the Daniels, and Bong Joon-ho. I think all of them are pretty much equal for me, but I also absolutely love Parasite, and I wasn't able to award it in any of these other categories just because other people were nudging them out, so I did want to give Bong Joon-ho the shout out there. Alright, and now it's time to talk about my favorite picks for all the above the line categories across all 96 years of the Academy Awards. Since this was a Best Picture tier list, it's pretty easy to tell what my favorite Best Picture winner was, so we'll kick it off with that category. My nominees from all the past episodes are Casablanca, The Apartment, Kramer vs. Kramer, The Silence of the Lambs, and Everything Everywhere All at Once. Obviously, you guys saw the tier list. My favorite Best Picture winner is Casablanca. It is truly just a timeless movie. It came out in the 40s, and it has stood the test of time. It has one of the greatest screenplays of all time. Bergman and Bogart are phenomenal. That final scene just punches me in the gut every single time. And what I really love about this movie is I recently visited Los Angeles, and I was able to see a bunch of original things used in the film. I saw both of the costumes from the final scene. I saw both of the pianos that Dooley Wilson plays. I saw the doors to Rick's Cafe, and I also saw the Best Picture trophy at the Warner Brothers lot, which was just so cool to see. I rewatched the movie after coming home from that trip, and it made me love it just even more. It's truly one of the greatest films of all time, and to me, Casablanca is the Best Picture winner. Up next is director. My nominees were Alfred Hitchcock, Rebecca; William Wyler, Ben-Hur; Milos Forman, Amadeus; James Cameron, Titanic; and Bong Joon-ho, Parasite. Now, this is an absolutely stacked lineup. I mean, Alfred Hitchcock is here, who is my all-time favorite director, but out of these 5 films, I have to give it to James Cameron for Titanic. That movie's scale is just so massive, and the amount of work and passion that went into recreating the Titanic ship into this 3-hour long romance epic is just completely mind-boggling to me. The special effects and everything done in that film hold up to today, even when it was done way back in the 90s. We all know some special effects from the 80s and 90s have aged pretty poorly, but Titanic truly feels like a movie that could have came out today. It is a movie that is just a directorial feat. Even if you aren't the biggest fan of the story or just the film overall, you at least have to give credit to Cameron's vision because it was massive and he executed it amazingly. Up next, we have screenplay. The nominees are Casablanca, The Apartment, Kramer vs. Kramer, The Silence of the Lambs, and Spotlight. Now, I know I said the past 2 lineups were stacked, but this might be the most stacked lineup out of any category I'm covering. When I think about screenplay, these are easily probably all in my top 25 favorite screenplays of all times, I'd have to say. Just phenomenal writing from top to bottom. These are 5 films I can watch over and over and not get sick of. But I do kind of want to spread the love, and I absolutely love this screenplay, like I just said. I'm going to give it to The Apartment. I love Billy Wilder movies, and his screenplays are always just top-notch. The dialogue is on point, and that's the real driving force behind a lot of his movies. When I think of Double Indemnity and The Apartment, probably my 2 favorite Wilder films, I just think of the screenplay right away. Just fantastic writing, fantastic pacing that keeps you engaged throughout. Just an overall amazing movie, but I really truly think that the main standout here from just a screenplay perspective is The Apartment. Moving over to the acting categories, we have supporting actress up first. My nominees were Teresa Wright in The Best Years of Our Lives, Rita Moreno, West Side Story, Meryl Streep, Kramer vs. Kramer, Catherine Zeta-Jones, Chicago, and Lupita Nyong'o, 12 Years a Slave. I have to go with Meryl Streep in Kramer vs. Kramer. I think Kramer vs. Kramer is one of the most raw and human films to ever win Best Picture. It's just so realistic. I feel like I was watching this relationship unfold like a true story. Not a single second of this movie feels fabricated or played up for the sake of the film. It feels like a just true, raw, American family issues divorce story, and I loved every single second of it. And Meryl Streep is the queen of the Oscars. She has the most acting nominations of all time, I believe, especially for actresses. And she has just accomplished so much in her career. And out of all the Meryl Streep movies I've seen, I definitely haven't seen all of them. Kramer vs. Kramer is up there for me for one of my all-time favorites. Moving over to supporting actor, my nominees were Harold Russell, The Best Years of Our Lives, Carl Malden, On the Waterfront, Robert De Niro, The Godfather Part 2, Morgan Freeman, $1 Million Baby, and Ke Huy Quan, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Out of all of these categories I'm talking about today, this is the easiest selection for me. It is Harold Russell in The Best Years of Our Lives. The fact that this man was a World War II veteran, lost both of his arms in the war, came back and delivered one of the greatest performances I've ever seen as a non-professional actor, it is just mind-boggling. All the performances in The Best Years of Our Lives is just, they're all just fantastic. But Harold Russell is the true standout. It's just a gut-wrenching, emotional performance at its core, and I honestly teared up in this movie. This movie had me just crying at multiple points, and very specifically at the scene where Harold Russell is talking about his girlfriend and feeling like he's not worth anything after coming back and just can't get around and has to struggle with like these two mechanical arms. Just outstanding stuff. One of the greatest performances of all time. I actually saw his Oscar at the Academy Museum in LA as well. I forgot if I took a picture of it or not. If I did, I'll throw that up on screen here. But yeah, easily one of my favorite Oscar performances. Up next is actress in a leading role. My nominees were Vivien Leigh, Gone with the Wind, Bette Davis, All About Eve, Shirley MacLaine, Terms of Endearment, Jodie Foster, The Silence of the Lambs, and Michelle Yeoh, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Now this is one that was a little bit closer for me. I was really between Bette Davis and Jodie Foster, but I have to go with Jodie Foster. I think that is one of the greatest performances ever put to film. Just all of the emotion conveyed just through her facial expressions as she's digging in further into this research, trying to find out who Buffalo Bill is while dealing with Anthony Hopkins playing Hannibal Lecter. It's one of the most layered performances of all time, and it's a film where it doesn't seem like, you know, that lead performance would need to be extremely layered, but Jodie Foster just brings so much to the table, cranks that character up to 11, and I truly don't believe The Silence of the Lambs would be as good as it is if Jodie Foster was not in that leading role. Just truly phenomenal stuff from top to bottom. But yeah, I also have to give a shout out to Bette Davis because she is fantastic in All About Eve as well. And the final category, actor in a leading role. My nominees were Humphrey Bogart, Casablanca, Rod Steiger in The Heat of the Night, Marlon Brando, The Godfather, Anthony Hopkins, The Silence of the Lambs, and Cillian Murphy, Oppenheimer. This was the hardest category for me to decide on. I think Bogart, Brando, and Hopkins are all very, very deserving of this selection here. Three just otherworldly performances in my opinion. I mean, Casablanca is my favorite Best Picture winner. The Godfather is timeless, and so is, you know, Anthony Hopkins. But I think I have to go with Marlon Brando in The Godfather. Just that accent in his puffed out lower cheeks are just some of the most memorable moments from any character in any film in history. The movie is so good because of the scenes that Brando are in. I don't think if Brando was in this movie, The Godfather would be nearly as good. To me, Brando makes that first Godfather movie, and he is sorely missed in The Godfather Part 2. Just fantastic from top to bottom. I could just sit down and just watch his scenes over and over again. When talking about great performances, Marlon Brando may have delivered the greatest performance of all time in The Godfather. And, you know, I think Hopkins and Bogart are in that conversation as well, but I think Brando is just a little bit above, so I'm going with him. And finally, to end this series, I have one last little bit of information I was tracking throughout this challenge, and that's my average score per decade. On screen now, you can see the average of all 10 movies per each decade, you know, with the exception of the 20s and the 2020s. The 2010s ended up being my highest rated decade. I wasn't really expecting that. I was more leaning towards the 70s and 90s, but they're all very, very close. I thought it was kind of weird how decades seem to alternate between a high score and a lower score. Obviously, the earlier decades were harder for me to connect with. Just some longer films with subject matter that I wasn't fully invested in. But once you hit the 70s, there are some absolute bangers. And that's not saying there aren't some fantastic films before then, but I think things really start picking up in the 70s. In my opinion, looking as a whole, I think the 70s is probably the best decade for the Oscars, and then I think the 90s and 2010s are probably pretty evenly matched in my opinion, but I thought this was just a cool bit of information that I wanted to share. Well, there you have it. All 96 Best Picture winners ranked by me, along with my personal choices for every single above-the-line category at the Academy Awards. Let me know what you thought about this entire series in the comments below, and please let me know your top 10 favorite Oscar Best Picture winners as well. I'm very excited to continue making videos for this channel and maybe transition to another big series like this one. But until I figure out what that's going to be, I hope you all have a great one. See you in the next video.